Welcome back to ApeTech Tutorials, Scratch Edition, where we teach you guys how to program in a graphical way. Stay tuned for part 2, where we will learn how to make the main character to jump and move to the right at the same time. And we're also going to be having our background moving and scrolling at the same time. And we're also going to show you a little bit, for those of you who don't have special tools out there, on how to edit your current sprites and make them, change them a little or change them drastically. It's up to you guys. Thank you so much for staying with us and supporting us on this journey. And like always, don't forget to subscribe and like us. So let's go ahead and get started. Like always, let's go ahead and get started with the demo. So this, as you can see, my background is scrolling, and my dog, which I've changed to a dog now, has the ability to jump to the right. And every time he gets touched by that fireball that is rolling, he'll turn into this grumpy little brown character. So let's go ahead and get into the code to explain to you guys. On part 1, I explained to you guys a lot of the controlling the character thing. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is look at what we have in our backdrop. Our backdrop, we decided to put all of our constants in there, or all of our variables that need to get changed. And this is a good idea because whenever you have constants or variables that need to be initialized to something, you always want to initialize them in a place, and that way they won't always be done and you won't forget about them. So the variables that I am initializing here is the jump height to 15, like we did last time. And if you guys remember, I used to have this in the dog sprite, and I now put it in here on my backdrop. And for those of you who do not know what a backdrop is, the backdrop is just your stage. And I currently have a blank backdrop, and that's okay. I don't need anything on the background since my sprites are the ones that are going to be showing me the background. So this code I put in there, and I'm treating my backdrop kind of like a main. And a main is basically the first thing that runs when you run a program. So the first thing I wanted to do was to initialize all my variables here. And these are constant variables. And you have a couple new variables, this jump x speed and this x velocity. So these have to do with the ability of my dog being able to jump to the right, move to the right while we're jumping. I set my variables, and then forever I change this x variable by velocity. And this again has to do with the ability of the dog being able to jump and move to the right at the same time. Now the next thing I did was to create a rolling background. So to be able to make that rolling background, what you do is you create 2 instances of the same sprite. But I usually always do one first and then put the code, because the code is usually the same except for one variable that we have to change in there. So we start one of our backgrounds, and basically what you guys do, and I did cover this in another tutorial back a month ago, I think. But for those of you who haven't seen that tutorial, it's basically you make a custom of a background. So you get whatever background you want and you make it a custom, like you see here. And then that custom, you make a copy of it. But do make a copy of it once you have the code done, because then you have to repeat the code. So that will be easier and you'll have the code done already. So for custom number 1 here, what I did was to set the background layer to 4 layers. So the reason I put it to 4 layers is because since I started with this after I had already done my game, this background was on the top. So the first thing you start with, the first sprite, is usually your first layer. So if you were to start with this first, then you won't have to put this send to backwards 4 layers, because it will be already in the back. And then the next sprite that you continue with will be the next layer up. But since I started with my characters first, when I put it, it was right on top of everything, so I had to move it back. And I want my backdrop to start at 0, 0, so at the top on the corner at 0, 0. Sorry, right here, because it starts right here. I want it to start right here, 0, 0. And every backdrop has a little cross on it that you center, and it'll be your 0. That will be your 0, 0, or that will be the point of a point that this is at. And I'll show you in a little bit. And then I want it to show, and forever. This is how we control it to make it look like it's scrolling at all times. Forever I want it to move by -3, and the reason I want it to move by -3 is because it's moving to the left, and it's scrolling to the left. So move by -3 if the position, the X position, is less than -460, then we want to go to positive 460 for X and just leave Y at 0. So that's for number 1. And let me show you the little cross really quickly. The cross that I was talking about, if you go here and you go to customs, when you try moving it, there's this little cross here. That is your center. Right there. That is your center. Now the second backdrop, which is again a sprite, the second backdrop, the code is very similar. The only difference is now we're looking for, we're starting here instead of starting it at the 0, 0. And the reason we start at 465 is because the other one ended at that point. So we want them to be right on top of each other. That way it looks like it's scrolling and it's a continuous motion. You do want to make sure you choose backgrounds that are not too much going on, or if it is, they look continuous, because you want to be able to make it look like it's a continuous loop. If you choose a background with trees and then a background with houses, you need to figure out how to connect them together so that when it scrolls, it doesn't look like it just suddenly jumped to something else. That is to be able to make the scrolling motion game style. So that's about it for those two items. This allows you to make that scrolling motion that you guys were seeing where the background is scrolling. And let me show you really quick. So the scrolling, what I mean by scrolling is this. If you look at the background here, it looks like it's scrolling. And then the next thing we did was to go ahead and change our sprite that we had for our main character slightly a little. The only difference that I did from part 1 to part 2 was to put this the jump height variable that I had in here. I put it in the backdrop to be able to have it in that area, since I always want that to happen. And then I added this X and Y because I want him, when the flag starts, to start at a specific location on the screen, and that's what I did. This is the only change I did to this character. For those of you who want to know how the rest of it works, look at part 1. That explains how the rest of this code works here. But I just wanted to cover really quickly the change that I did for this. Oh, and I also changed the character to a dog. Okay, so let's move to the next one. And then I also added the functionality for our dog, our main character, to be able to move to the right while it's jumping. And the way this was done was to create a forever loop where we would check if the arrow is pressed, if the right arrow is pressed, set the velocity to jump X speed. And these are my two new variables. And then we change X by velocity. And we're just changing the velocity. And then I also added this if here, where when it gets to the edge of my screen, I wanted to go back to this location here. So I wanted it to look like the character kept coming into the screen. Because if you don't add these, then your character will be stuck at the edge of the screen on the on the right side of your screen, and then this allows it to look like it's coming around into your new scrolling area. So that's it for the main character. Now for the danger object, I used to have a soccer ball, but I modified it to look a little more dangerous. The code did not change. It's the same code as part 1. If you guys want to look at part 1 to kind of see the explanation on that, go ahead and check that one out. I just want to show you on this sprite how I actually did it to make it look like it's a fireball. I mean, I'm not a professional in any way, shape, or form in Paint or Photoshop or any kind of thing like that. So this was the best way I found it, and it might be the best way for you guys as well, for those of you who don't know how to do any of that fancy stuff. Let me see. Let me find the ball. So what I did, if you just grab the ball, right? There's my ball down here. You guys can click on this arrow here with the dot, and what that does, if you highlight the whole thing, it'll show you all the little pinpoints you can poke at, and it also will give you new ones if you don't have them. So what I did is I clicked on the item I wanted to make sharp, and I just started pulling on areas. And if you see, once you click on it, it'll start letting you edit the item itself. So this is what I started doing. I went around the ball and I just started making sharp areas. And you can also do like weird things like this if you want, but I started doing like little sharp pointy things for it because I wanted it to look like kind of like a fireballs, dangerous kind of thing. And this is a good tool. I mean, it works. It's not fancy, but it works pretty good for those of you who don't know much on the whole Photoshop and all that stuff. I personally don't. I'm not very artistic in that way, but that's what I did. And then the last thing I did was just change his color. Obviously I took a little longer time to do that than what I did right now, but I chose kind of like the double layer thing because it's pretty, kind of shows like flames are usually different colors. So then I just colored the whole ball in whatever color. I went around and colored it, and once I had the whole ball colored and ready to go, I did what I did in the first video where I highlighted the whole, well, I made a copy of it first, right, where I wanted to, so I duplicated it, and then I highlight the whole thing, and make sure you have this arrow thing looking thing, and then these arrows here, you just rotate them, and you keep doing that. You keep duplicating and rotating, duplicating and rotating, and make sure you duplicate the last one you edit, and just kind of get a pinpoint of what is your point of start, and just make it turn. So that's what I did with this guy. Nothing fancy, just learning how to do that. And that's how my ball turned out. So I made it look like that, and I just kept changing it, making it look like it was rotating. And that's how we make it look like that. And that's it on the ball. Let's see, let's go back to our PowerPoint. So that was all that I did for now. I am trying to figure out how to make walls appear randomly in my game. That's a task for today, hopefully. I want to make it that, and then I also want to have some sort of object flying up here that throws things, and that are, we can either have them be dangerous or be good things depending on how we want to make this game. I'm still debating that one since I don't want to hurt the dog, but it's just a character. And I'll probably be changing also like the colors for my character. Like for your dog, if you look at it, Scratch has made them in a way that you can actually change the colors of your characters. So you can make it unique to your liking. If you don't want to change the shape or look of it, you can definitely change these colors just by the look of the way it looks, just by changing the colors of the character. Right, and let's say you just change it to that orange and you're like, oh, where's that orange, right? Well, the way you can do it is if you click on these guys, you can go ahead and click on the paint, and on the bottom this is a little eyedropper, and just go with the eyedropper and click on the color you want, and it would automatically do it for you. So we're gonna do solid color. You could also do any of those here, and that will help you to get the color in case you don't know what color it was. Oops, don't know if I want that orange eye there. And maybe you'll have to zoom in for some parts, but there. And that's your character. And let's see. So in summary, we basically taught you guys how to do a scrolling screen on the background, so that it looks like your game is continuous going. The ability for your character to jump and move to the right. There is code to do jump to the back, to the left, but I didn't think my character needed it since my screen is scrolling and I'm not having to go back. I wanted to keep going forward. For the screens that are usually not scrolling, if you want to be able to do that, that's totally possible too. Let me know if you guys want to see that. So we showed you how to scroll the screen. We showed you how to make your character jump to the right. We also showed you guys how to set your variables in your backdrops as your kind of main variables and the first thing that happens when your program runs. We also showed you guys how to edit a sprite to make it a little more unique for your game. And for the next steps, we're gonna figure out how to make more obstacles, objects falling from the sky, all this kind of stuff. And thank you so much for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.